Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. I apologize for my absence, but I'll tell you about that momentarily. Let me start with macro thoughts, and I saw this quote on a Bloomberg article. In some cases, malfunctioning algorithms have interfered with market functioning, inundating trading venues with message traffic or creating short-lived spikes in prices. And I think it's sometimes not malfunctioning, it's actually the way algorithm traders work. They just sort of gobble you up. And I remember sort of 2 in the morning being gobbled up on the euro, and it wasn't a pleasant experience. I think you continue to buy the dollar, sell the euro. Then I've been saying that for quite a while, and with good reason. On the 29th of September, I said there is a small window for shocks as dollar rises. And on the 12th of January, I said the euro-dollar exchange rate is headed to parity and even lower in 2015, and now most people have fallen into line on that thought. Home thoughts. We were in Dubai for a week for the Easter break, for Hannah's birthday. We had a lovely time, and I'll start with a quote by the Sheikh. "Failure is not falling to the ground, it is remaining there once you have fallen. And the greatest failure is when you decide not to stand up again." We had a lovely time, I must admit. It really amazes me how the Sheikh magicked this 21st century metropolis out of the desert sands. We spent a night at the Ritz-Carlton when we first got there, had some meetings, and I wanted to hold them in a suite. Appearances count for a lot in the Middle East. And I'll put up a photograph of Hannah at the Ritz-Carlton. The girls certainly enjoy themselves. Dubai is no longer cheap and trades at a premium to London, in my opinion, in terms of restaurants and so forth and hotels. We visited a number. The occupancy rates were in the 90s. I mean, it was phenomenal. And you just think, when you compare what's happening here to what's happening there, that, you know, after 5 years, those who are there are so far ahead of those who are here. I'll put up a photograph of my workstation, which was in my brother's garden next to the pool, and it was rather nice one night. The moon was out and I was sitting there, and I was really extremely sort of relaxed and did rather well, actually. Rumi, who says, "We come spinning out of nothingness, scattering stars like dust." We took Hannah to Atlantis for her birthday. She got to kiss the dolphin, and she thoroughly enjoyed that. And she took a ride on the Leap of Faith. By that time I'd bailed out because my phone was running out and I couldn't keep in touch with everything, but I had a lovely half day with them, and then they continued. And I'm glad I didn't stay on, because I think I would have had a heart attack if I'd gotten down on such a ride. Returning to the Sheikh. "Life is an extraordinary gift some people appear not to appreciate. In every breath and scent, every touch and sight, we are gifted by new experience and the chance to feel the richness of experience. Every sound we hear, from the song of a bird to the harshness of an angry voice, is a miracle." And in 2014, when I was there, I wrote a piece, "Dubai is the real transit state, a connection point in an interconnected century." And on that point, I saw a piece in Bloomberg where a fellow called Brian Plamondon said, "Once those restrictions on Iran are removed, I suspect Dubai would become the hub for trade with Iran." And I think he's absolutely right. He also said Jebel port is a huge facilitator for trade. I thank my brother Samir, his wife Mitali, and the twins Kabir and Mira for hosting us. I'll put up a photograph of them as well. And I said to Sam, and Mitali, "Do you know the poem called The Swing by Kabir?" Because their son is named after Kabir. And they both said no. And I read it to them. It is probably my favorite poem. "Between the poles of the conscious and the unconscious, there has the mind made a swing. Thereon hang all beings and all worlds, and that swing never ceases its sway. Millions of beings are there, the sun and the moon in their courses are there, millions of ages pass, and the swing goes on, all swing. The sky and the earth and the air and the water. Imagine my mother who passed away a long time ago on that swing. Hannah celebrated her birthday at 39,000 feet as well, admittedly on the following day. I put up a photograph of the 3 girls enjoying themselves. And it was a pleasure to catch up with Nishit's brother and his wife at the Waldorf Astoria in Ras Al Khaimah. I'll put up a photograph of the Waldorf Astoria there. It was packed to the rafters. I like this photograph from Globe Pics, Lonely Road, Death Valley, California. It took me back to Jack Kerouac. Nothing behind me, everything ahead of me, as is ever on the road. Hillary Clinton has announced that she's running for president. Everyday Americans need a champion, and I want to be that champion, she said. I'm an admirer of strong, capable women, and Hillary has my vote. Of course, I disagree on a number of things, but then this is the nature of politics. I'm running for president, she said. Translating personal charm into a national campaign tactic will be the challenge for Clinton. But digital technology has a way of amplifying the intimate, and Clinton has embraced it, becoming a star of Twitter. Fantastic article in the New Yorker about Xi Jinping. I can't read you all, but I highlighted some which I'd like to point out to you. It's by Evan Osnos, and it was published about 6 days ago, but I only read it yesterday. When he received a guest, he stood still, long arms slack, hair pomaded, a portrait of take it or leave it composure that induced his visitor to cross the room in pursuit of a handshake. He often quotes from Chinese classics, very well read. He's read Krylov, Pushkin, Gogol, Lermontov, Turgenev, Dostoevsky. He's the 6th man to rule the People's Republic of China, the first who was born after the revolution in 1949. As Lenin ordained in 1902, for the center to actually direct the orchestra, it needs to know who plays the violin and where, who plays a false note and why. He's at the center of everything, Gary Locke, the former American ambassador in Beijing, told Ivan. In a leadership known for grooming colourless apparatchiks, Xi projects an image of manly vigour. He mocks eggheads and praises the team spirit of a group of dogs eating a lion. In a meeting in March 2013, he told the Russian President Putin, "We are similar in character." Xi said people who have little experience with power, those who have been far away from it, tend to regard these things as mysterious and novel. But I look past the superficial things, the power and the flowers and the glory and the applause. I see the detention houses, the fickleness of human relationships. I understand politics on a deeper level, he says. And then describing that period when he disappeared, listen to this, he disappeared for a few weeks. He cancelled a meeting with Hillary Clinton. Beset by crises, Xi suddenly disappeared. On September 4th, 2012, he cancelled a meeting with the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, and visits with other dignitaries. As the days passed, lurid rumours emerged, ranging from a grave illness to an assassination attempt. When he reappeared on September 19th, he told American officials that he had injured his back. Analysts of Chinese politics still raise the subject of Xi's disappearance in the belief that a fuller explanation of why he vanished might illuminate the depth or fragility of his support. In dozens of conversations this winter, scholars, officials, journalists and executives told me that they suspect he did have a health problem and also reasons to exploit it. They speculate that Xi in effect went on strike. He wanted to install key allies, remove opponents before taking power, but party elders ordered him to wait. A former intelligence official told me Xi basically says, "Okay, F-U-C-K-U, let's see you find someone else for this job. I'm going to disappear for 2 weeks and miss the Secretary of State." And that's what did it. He caused a stir. and they went running and said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa." The handoff went ahead as planned. On November 15, 2012, Xi became General Secretary. Chinese observers tend to mention something else, his guzuku, or air of nobility. Shortly after taking over, Xi asked, "Why did the Soviet Communist Party collapse?" and declared, "It's a profound lesson for us." Chinese scholars had studied that puzzle from dozens of angles, but Xi wanted more. In 2009, he commissioned a long study of the Soviet Union from somebody who works in the Policy Research Office. It concluded that the rot started under Brezhnev. In the paper, the guy cited a joke. Brezhnev brings his mother to Moscow. He proudly shows her the state apartments at the Kremlin, his ZIL limousine, and the life of luxury he now lives. "Well, what do you think, Mama?" says Brezhnev. "You'll never have to worry about a thing ever again. I'm so proud of you, Leonid Ilyich," says Mama. "But what happens if the communists find out?" Xi loved the story. Reserved special scorn for Gorbachev for failing to defend the party against its opponents, and told his colleagues nobody was man enough to stand up and resist. Last it's September, when pro-democracy protests erupted in Hong Kong, an opinion piece in the Global Times, a state-run daily, accused the National Endowment for Democracy and the CIA of being black hands behind the unrest, intent on stimulating Taiwanese independence, Xinjiang independence, and Tibetan independence. The periphery about which I've spoken is his weak point. Xi told people that he was impressed by Putin's seizure of Crimea. He got a large piece of land and resources and boosted his poll numbers at home. The most surprising thing, according to Evan, about the era of Xi Jinping is a decision to close off the margins. China's economy is likely to be Xi's greatest obstacle after economic growth of, on average, nearly 10% a year for more than 3 decades. The party expected growth to slow to a sustainable pace of around 7%, but it could fall more sharply. The turning point in the economy really was about 4 or 5 years ago, and now you see the classical problem of the declining productivity of capital. For every dollar you invest, you're getting far less bang for your buck. And I think that was that comment about the economy is an important one, and you'll see why, because we have had some dreadful economic figures out of China. Just one point I'm going to make is his body language is very alpha. It's like a chap I know here who runs East African breweries. He is very similar in that. Just look at this photograph I'm going to put up of Xi Jinping and Shinzo Abe at APEC, and you'll see what I'm talking about. "We are now in a position to move on a path to the future," says Barack Obama, after obviously a historic meeting with Cuban President Raul Castro. We're now in a position to move on a path to the future. Castro sat next to Obama during the bilateral meeting during the Summit of the Americas in Panama, said what President Obama has just said is practically the same as we feel about these topics. And Cuba, in my opinion, is the aperitif for the big one, which is Iran. I'll put up a photograph. Ian Bremner tweeted, "Obama meets Raul Castro, all smiles." The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia says mortar fire from Houthi fighters has killed 3 army officers and wounded 2 others in Najran. And I'd previously said, well, actually on the April 11th and before that, the Houthis must be licking their chops, waiting for the kingdom to put boots on the ground. Pakistan has turned them down, and I think that was a good idea. The Saudis are saying 500 Yemen rebels are dead on the border since the air war began. And Asiri told reporters, at the appropriate time, we will take action on the ground. That's going to be fraught with danger. Saleh once compared governing in Yemen to dancing on the heads of snakes. iPhone Siri declared that the Houthi leader is now the president of Yemen. Interesting article, Last King's Succession in the Persian Gulf. That's Bloomberg View. That link is on Rich Wrap-Ups. And then Global Research is saying US is playing chicken with the Russian Air Force while nukes are on a hair trigger alert. A Russian Su-27 jet intercepted a US RC-135U reconnaissance plane that was closing in on the territory of the Russian Federation. Unable to identify the radar target, the Russian Air Force deployed the interceptor, forcing the US plane to change course. Well, that still remains extremely volatile. Coming to international markets, China's March exports shrank 15% in a year-on-year shock fall. Import shipments fell at their sharpest rate since the 2009 global financial crisis. The tumble in exports, the worst in about a year, compared with expectations for a 12% rise, and could heighten worries about the state of the economy. That was the biggest slump in imports since May 2009. I agree with Stephen Jen, who says there's pent-up demand for the US currency that will underpin years of appreciation because the world is structurally short of the dollar. Short covering will continue to power the dollar higher, said Yen, who predicts a 10% advance in the next 3 months to 96 cents per euro. The dollar's strength is not just about cyclical factors such as growth. The recent consolidation will likely prove to be temporary. I agree with him. Euro is at 105.93. Dollar index is headed back above 100. Japanese yen 120.37. I think that's going to 125. But the Japanese are currently trying to damp it down. Swissy is at 0.9796. Aussie had a terrible session. It's below 76, 0.75948. India rupee 62.285. South Korean won 10.9503. The real, which I think is going to 4, when I checked last, was at 307.59. Egyptian pound 763.26. South African rand is at 1207.27. There is clearly evidence that the payroll's miss on April 3rd was an outlier. Bear in mind that the dollar is very highly correlated to interest rate yields, because you've got German 10-year going up to 0, you've got the US 10-year at 1.95%, and the movement in that 10 and 30 years driving a lot of the price action in the dollar. The greenback is just shy against the euro of a 12-year high, and it's so far up 7% this year. Dollar index, I'll put up a 3-month chart, and I think it's going to slice through 100 like a hot knife through butter. Euro dollar, as I said, 105.95. I'm looking for 0.93. And I see that Barclays' chief FX strategist in Tokyo thinks the same. We think the euro will fall below parity against the dollar by the end of the year because of the ECB's easing and low returns on capital in the eurozone. The Economist has a very interesting article about how Labour governments have been undone by the pound before in 1967 and 1976. The article is in fact called Britain's Mitterrand Moment. I'm using the example of what happened to Mitterrand when he came to power, and he had to turn his whole program around and embrace austerity. According to The Economist, as the poll stands, the British election on May 7th looks likely to result in a Labour minority government. A model for the FT by populists gives Ed Miliband an 80% chance of being the next Prime Minister. I'm looking for a minimum level of 136.50 now in cable. I'll put up a 1-year chart. I think you sell any rallies. Zero Hedge tweeted UK housing bubble bursts. Sales of luxury homes crash by 80%. Waves of wealthy people are leaving. And then this was interesting. NetJets' CEO says this year should be bigger for us than any year since 2007. And that explains to you how robust the US economy is. The industry is about 85 to 90% back. Dichter said, I see 2016, 2017 as being A-Day banner years for private aviation. I'll put up a photograph I found of a private jet which is available for hire in Mumbai. And you can also book the Four Seasons private jet as well, and I'll put up a photograph of that as well. Gold was last trading at 1204.22. Had a bit of a bounce Friday on news that India had been big buyers of gold, but I think it's now looking back at the currency markets. Crude oil, $51.78 last time I checked. I think you sell rallies again because the market is now long. Very good article by Nicholas Schmidler in the New Yorker. Emerging markets, the kings of the desert, an American banker, Saudi billionaire, and a financial collapse that stunned the Middle East. This is all about the Ghosaibi family, Al-Ghosaibi family, and it's quite an extraordinary story, well worth reading. Coming to sub-Saharan Africa, Bashir is seen winning Sudan re-election as the opposition is splintered. A war crimes indictment and a role in the dismembering of a united Sudan aren't hindering President Umar al-Bashir's chances of re-election, according to analysts who say he's certain to win the three-day vote that starts Monday. I think there is about 0% chance for anyone running for president, said a fellow Harry Verhoeven. Blair, Blair, who was he? Just the Prime Minister of Britain. I'm President of Zimbabwe. We want peace, and peace does not mean you have a lion's share and others have a baboon share, he said. No, you're all together. Let's be equal. Inequality can breed other problems in the future. If Blair's England was no longer willing to pay for the land, should we have just folded our hands and said, "O Lord Almighty, I pray in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost"? Goodness me, no. So some pretty interesting comments he made in South Africa. South African stocks rallied to a record in their best week since January. The index closed at 53,420. Tends to be well correlated with European and international markets. European markets are near all-time highs as well. South African all shares up 8.64% year to date. Dollar rand, as I said, 1207.93. I remain bearish the rand. Egypt has sentenced the Muslim Brotherhood leader and others to death. I'll put up a photograph of Mohammed Badi. He's in the center, and other co-defendants during the trial in Cairo. I think Sisi is overstepping the mark in terms of the repression, but I have some sympathy for his point of view about the Muslim Brotherhood. Egyptian pound 763.26. Egyptian stock market, which had a startling bullish start at the beginning of the year, is now only up 0.41%. Nigeria all shares up 2.35% year to date, and has ramped 26.58% higher since closing at a two-year low on February 13th. And obviously, a lot of political risk was reduced. Ghana Stock Exchange is down 1.63% year to date. Interesting piece by Eurasia. Mozambique, how big a threat is Renamo to the Frelimo-led government? Since the end of Mozambique's civil war, the political landscape in that nation has never been so uncertain and unstable. Renamo, turned opposition party, made an assertive comeback in the October 2014 elections and is increasingly motivated to press the government towards satisfying its demands. In this context, the ruling party, Frelimo, faces a dilemma. Should they cede more ground to Renamo's leader, Afonso Dhlakama, to accommodate him, or refuse and risk new armed clashes? According to this article, estimates point to a 1,000-strong Renamo armed wing. I'll put up a photograph of Maputo taken from the sea. Ethiopia, Orthodox Easter festivities are underway, and I too wish Ethiopians a happy Easter. Coming to Kenya, the New York Times had a very powerful article. It's linked on Rich Wrap-Ups, saying that many of the students killed in Kenya represented a life their parents never dared dreaming of. I sold sugarcane, I sold our cows, said Rosina Wonder, whose daughter Selfa was killed at the school. And at the burial, according to this article by Jeffrey Gettleman, this is the way to heaven, people sang. A light drizzle began to fall, and people praised the rain. It was the beginning of the rainy season. The clumps of earth shoveled onto the coffin fell quietly, damp soft. KCB Group has overtaken Equity Bank in terms of valuation. Closing price of 63, which is a record high on Friday, took its valuation to 188 billion shillings, ahead of Equity, which is now valued at 178.6 billion. In the past month, Equity has lost 6.7% in value on profit taking, and KCB has gained 8.6%. Equity always wait for KCB to release their results, and then you can't help feeling they finesse theirs. And I think it is that act of finessing which the market has not liked. KCB is at a record 63. The link is up there for their full year results and anything else you might care to take a look at. I also did an interview after those full year results with Joshua Oigara. Have a look at that link. And he has probably the least cluttered desk of anyone I know. My piece over the weekend was about Kenya Airways, the pride of Africa. President Kagame said the following at the US-Africa Summit last year. He said the markets are never wrong. Airline stocks worldwide have soared. The catalyst for this rally, which has floated all boats except that of our national carrier, has been the collapse in the price of oil. Fuel is typically the single biggest expense item for airlines, and you do not have to be a rocket scientist to appreciate that when your single biggest expense item falls by 50%, you are in a very sweet spot. Therefore, this rising tide has floated all boats, airlines, except Kenya Airways, which has slumped 23.68% over the past 4 weeks, as investors dump the stock at practically any price. The question is therefore, why has Kenya Airways slumped to multi-year lows? I concur with President Kagame about the markets never being wrong, and we are now at a point when we have to understand what is wrong, and something has to be done before the airline enters a death spiral. I appreciate there have been challenges, travel warnings, and the Al-Shabaab insurgency, and also Ebola. The West African route was the jewel and the crown. This is all well known. The competition is now parked in Kenya Airways' backyard. This week I was in Dubai, and I noted the Emirates flight was full and carrying more than 400 passengers. The KQ flight had 40 on a Dreamliner, and that, frankly, is a loss, plain and simple. You can't continue like that. Let's return to the business per se. The fuel hedging is incompetence of the highest order. Sure, the banks have made money, and if the blogs are to be believed, and the silence from Kenya Airways is a very loud signal in this regard. So have some insiders. But essentially, whatever the reason, it is clear now that the board is fast asleep, or worse. I worked for the Japanese once, and if there was a similar situation, the management would man up and there would be a mass resignation. This is a national interest issue now, plain and simple. There needs to be a forensic audit, and not one of those whitewash ones. There needs to be a lifestyle audit to confirm that key employees are living at levels commensurate with their incomes. Furthermore, and this is the key, we need to speak to the big Gulf carriers like Emirates and Etihad to see how we can get them to take a stake, because they are proven operators who prima facie understand the airline business. KLM has nothing to offer anymore. The Kenyan government does not have the resource envelope to make a meaningful enough intervention. Someone has to get a grip, and get a grip now. The Nairobi All Shares up 4.125% year to date, has corrected 4.45% since closing at a record high on the 25th of February. The NSE 20 is up a marginal 0.2151% and has corrected 6.83% since closing at a more than 7-year high on March 2nd. If you want to check out any listed share, the link is at the bottom of Rich Wrap-Ups and on other places on the website. But if you're on Rich Wrap-Ups, you can take it from there. Once again, glad to be back. Thank you for coming by. I do appreciate it.